Hi, I'm Animate. This is the video shop. Currently teaching After Effects for Escape Studios here in London. Fun hypothetical. Let's say someone put a gun to my head and said, Adam, you have to teach After Effects in 1 hour. I'd probably have questions, but I'd definitely do what they said. So here we are. This is a tutorial for absolute beginners, even if you've never even opened After Effects before. I've been using After Effects for over 20 years, so you're in safe hands. Ignore that. Okay, let's get started. First, let's go to Window, Workspace, then All Panels. And if you select All Panels, your screen should look pretty much like mine. Over here's our project window. This is where all our assets such as video, audio, and graphics will go. The easiest way to import those is to just drag them directly onto the project window. Then if we highlight them, we can see up here some of the information such as the dimensions and the frame rate. The frame rate of this clip is 25 frames a second, so that's what we're going to work to. We need to create a new composition so we can start animating. As with a lot of things in After Effects, there's a few ways we can do this, but the easiest is probably to click on New Composition here. You can then select a preset, depending on what you want to output, and then set your duration. Or, if you want to use the exact dimensions, frame rate, and duration as your clip, you can just drag it onto the comp window here, and it'll create a comp for you. I'm just going to press enter and rename this comp. Stay organised, folks. So let's do a very quick tour. Up here's the toolbar. Let's say you simply want to crop footage. You can use the shape tool here. Then with your layer selected, you can just click and drag on the comp window, and it creates a mask. I'm using Shift to create a square. Click and hold on the tool, and you can select other shapes. We'll come back to some of these others. Up here are the different workspaces. You can create custom workspaces once you start using scripts and plugins. Down here's the timeline window. This is where you'll animate graphics and footage and create new assets. Actually, let's pop our music file in here now. There's no separate channels for video and audio, everything just gets stacked on the timeline. We can scrub through our timeline by clicking and dragging anywhere on the playhead area. If you hold Control as you scroll, you can hear the audio. But now that we've got video and audio in our comp, we really want to watch it in real time. If you're looking for the play controls, they're up here in the preview window. You can play, go forward or backward frames to the beginning or the end. But most of us use shortcuts such as the spacebar, so press it to play and again to stop. You can view other shortcuts here. My preference is numpad 0, as by default it starts at the beginning of your work area, but they're all customizable. We can move clips around the timeline by clicking and then dragging. So I'm just going to drag this clip over to here as she's doing the same thing twice. So we'll just use that bit there and then preview. So it's previewing the whole composition. What if we want to preview just a select portion? The work area is this bar here. If we pull in the edges and then preview, it'll preview just our work area. If a clip has audio, it will have this icon here. Lollipop Lady doesn't, but if I pull in, say, my filmed intro, you'll see it has both. Don't worry, I won't make you watch it again. If you want to see the waveform, you can untoggle the arrow here, then here, and then here. Remember, if you want them, shortcuts are at the top. I've just noticed that the audio is longer than the comp. In fact, it's 8 seconds 20. So if I click on the comp, then go up here to composition settings, I can change the duration to 10 seconds to be safe. And we can zoom in and out of our comp by using this icon here. If you want to preview just the audio, you can press the numpad full stop button. I will try to minimize the amount of times you have to listen to this song. I mean, it's fine, but yeah, sorry. So then if you want to, you can add markers to any layer by going Layer, Marker, Add Marker. These will come in handy later for making edits to the beat. Okay, so let's start thinking about what we're going to animate. To keep it simple, I'm thinking we could take some of these images, which I feel like are actually giving me diabetes. And we'll take, say, 5, because there's 5 letters in candy, and have them animate on as simple panels. They can come on one by one on top of the footage, then off again to reveal our lockup, and then we'll animate that somehow. Let's bring in those images then. I'd suggest being organised and using folders. Actually, that's not even a suggestion. I'm pretty militant about being organised. In fact, while I'm in a total workflow bore, let's save this project. I know, we haven't done anything yet, but trust me, I've had students who have spent hours animating, then lost their project because they never thought to initially save it. We'll call it Candy, and I'll save it here. Next, go to Edit, Preferences, and Autosave, and make sure it's enabled. You can thank me for that tip later. Let's pull all these assets onto our timeline. You can turn layers on and off with this video icon here, and the audio icon works the same way. This icon solos layers if you want to focus on one without turning off all the others. And this one, well, I won't patronise you by telling you what that is. 2D assets will appear depending on how they're stacked in the timeline. So if I move this image underneath the video, it's going to appear underneath it. So all these images are quite large. We can zoom in or out of the comp window by using this drop down here. If you want to scale anything up or down, you can grab one of these points in the comp window and then drag them, and if you hold shift, it'll maintain the proportions. If for any reason you can't see the bounding box and these small squares here, go to View and then make sure Show Layer Controls is selected. So we want to create this, and we could just mask off the images one by one, but they're all different sizes and we want them evenly distributed. So how do we do that in After Effects? We could map them, but I'll save alpha matting for later on. What we're going to do is use Precomps. If we click here, we can create a new comp, except that we want this one to be 1/5 of the comp width. So what we can do is select here, and then after the 1920, put a backslash and then 5, and then click off, and After Effects will calculate what that is. If, like me, maths isn't your strong suit. So we've got a comp of 384 by 1080. I'm going to name this comp Candy Image 01, and might just magic up another folder just to go in. Fab. Then we'll add one of the images, and again we can scale it using these points. And I don't want to overload you with shortcuts, so feel free to ignore this, but a handy shortcut for this would be Shift Control Alt G, which fits the image to the comp height for you. Like I say, use it if you want. Now we just need to do the other comps, so I'm going to duplicate this pre-comp, go in and delete the image, and then duplicate it 1, 2, 3 more times, select them all, double click, and then drag this one in, use the shortcut, and then this one, shortcut. I'm going to stop saying shortcuts. Okay, so now to distribute these evenly. So if we go back to our master comp, I'm going to delete these images and pull them all into our comp. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to use a shortcut for my sanity. So I'm going to take the first one, and then if I pull it across and hold Shift and Control, that will snap to the edge. And then the same thing for 05. Shift Control. Then I'm going to select them all, starting with the first one, and then Shift Select the other 4. Go to Align, and then here, distribute horizontally. And voila. We want to have these appear on and then go off. If I solo the video layer, you can trim layers by dragging in the out point and the same with the in point. just undo that. But let's say you're zoomed in, or your pre-comps are longer than your master comp and you can't see the edges to pull them in. One trick you can use is to select them all and then go Shift Control D, and that'll split them where the playhead is. But the handy thing is it'll leave the remainder of those clips selected, so you can easily just delete them and then you've trimmed them where you want. So we want to stagger them so they come on one by one. So what we can do is go here, go forward 3 frames, and we can do that. I'll get to the shortcut for this later, maybe. And then another 3. Control select that so it's unselected and then move across. But another way, if you have lots of layers or pre-comps and you want to do this, one thing you could do is make the duration of all of them 3 frames, and then we'll use our Shift Control D, trim them, and then again select them all starting with the one that you want to appear first, and then we'll right click and go Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, don't have any overlap, and then click OK, and it sequenced them for you, and then you can just pull out the endpoint, and then we've got this. Maybe a little bit shorter. And let's move those to... So actually, as I look at this, one of these images looks a little bit desaturated. You can browse effects here, but if you roughly know the name of the effect that you want to go for, you can click up to your effects and presets panel, and there's a search bar, and if we type in saturation, it's going to reveal the effect that we're looking for, so hue saturation, and we can either double click on it or just drag it over, and then we can bump up the saturation. We want these sweets to look vomit-inducingly saturated after all. So you might have noticed now that there's this icon that's appeared here. This is the effects column, and if we uncollapse here, we can see that we've now got, as well as this transform controls, we've got effects here. So properties such as audio and effects will have their own grouping, but these groups are a really important part of animating and adjusting properties in After Effects. So for example, if we drag this clip back in and then uncollapse, it's got 2 groups because it's got the main transform controls and audio as well. And if we wanted to add an effect to it, then you've also got an effects group as well. Again, we don't want this, so we'll delete it. Arguably, the most important set of properties are the transform controls. So here we can adjust the position, scale, rotation and opacity. And this is essentially the nuts and bolts of animation in After Effects. So much great motion design can be done just by animating these properties alone. Speaking of animating, we should probably get to that soon. We can add text or any important asset by right-clicking and then selecting New, and you've got them all listed here. Most of these are beyond the remit of this tutorial, but we can add a text layer. And I'll type in candy. Just going to close this properties window because I can adjust the typeface and justification here. So why add text that way and not this? So the reason I prefer to do it this way is that you know that it's perfectly centered already. So you're probably looking at that and saying, well, that's not centered. And that's because the anchor point is at the bottom of the text here. And if I go into the transform controls and rotate it, you can see that it's rotating around this anchor point here. So we can fix that by either moving the anchor point with the anchor point tool here, or a good tip, and this was actually pointed out to me by one of my students the other night, as I'd never used it before, is Control double click on that same anchor point icon, and that'll put the anchor point in the center. And then favorite shortcut of mine is Control and Home, and that centers anything that you've selected in screen. So now that text is perfectly centered. So actually looking at this, I really want to animate something now. So let's have that text scale in. Also notice that now we've got a text layer, we've got a new properties grouping text here, and we won't take a deep dive into this, but you can keyframe your source text and add text animators, but not today. So we'll go to 1 second in, and then we'll click this icon here, which is a stopwatch icon. That'll set a keyframe, and then this turns blue to indicate that keyframing is now active on that property. Anywhere in After Effects where you see a stopwatch icon, that can be keyframed. So now all we need to do, because keyframe isn't enabled, we can just move our playhead over to here, and then if we change this value by dragging on it, it's going to automatically create another keyframe for us. We're just going to scale it up so that it covers the whole screen. We need to go pretty large, so feel free to shift and drag. That'll multiply by 10 the value of the amount that you're dragging. So now we've got 2 keyframes, and if we scrub between, we have our first animation. And if we want to toggle between the keyframes, we can use these arrows here. That's important because you want to be actually on a keyframe if you want to say drop this to 90. So to drop it by 10, I've used the shift key and the down arrow, but feel free to type 90 or whatever, just to make sure that it's not covering too much of a face. So these are linear keyframes, and if we preview, I'm going to turn the audio off for previewing for my sanity and yours, and then I'm going to set the end of the work area using a shortcut N. We can see that the movement is linear, so therefore it's coming in quite slowly because it's scaled up very large to cover the screen, and then this last bit is pretty abrupt. So we can select these keyframes. To make that movement smoother, we can right click on these keyframes and go Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. Now you've got options of Easy Ease in, Easy Ease out. I pretty much always just Easy Ease because I want to be able to adjust the in value as well as the out value and make it bespoke. But if we just apply Easy Ease and then preview again, so that's already a bit better, but we can improve it a little bit. So what we're going to do is select one of these keyframes and then click on here for the graph editor. And we could spend a lot of time talking about just the graph editor alone, but briefly, if we pull out these Bezier handles, that's going to adjust how smoothly that text scales into place. And if I shift and drag it, it'll lock. Just going to pull it out here. And if you're not seeing this graph, click on choose graph type. I've got auto select graph type, but I'm looking at the value graph. Now you might be looking at something like this, which is the speed graph, and we'll look at that shortly to animate position, but we'll stick with value graph here. In fact, I'm going to stick with auto select. And then here, I don't want to be seeing this for very long, so I'm actually going to do something like that. So the steeper this curve is, the more quickly this amount here, the scale amount, is changing. And then towards the end, it's very slowly kind of resting into place. And might even do that. Now, I've got it animating over a second. We can drag the keyframe and make that movement a bit quicker just by pulling the keyframe in, and then preview again. And that's what you want to be doing. You always want to be tweaking the ease in values and then previewing, adjusting the distance between the keyframes, the timing, preview again, and just keep on repeating until you're happy with it. But that'll do. Well, no, not that'll do, but you know, that's okay for what we want. So we'll have this animating in, and then I think maybe this clip's a little bit, let's maybe trim it back a bit more. So I'm going to go to, let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to select all of these, pull them across to maybe here, and just move that text underneath because I want these going on top. And then let's set that to be the end of the work area preview. Okay, it's probably time to add the audio. Yeah, that's good, because it seems like the movement of the lollipop is going in time to the music. And then these seem to be sort of coming on in time to the music as well, so that's quite nice. Right, so let's bring our logo in and animate it. So I've got two versions, they're both identical. Just going to show you how to import PSD and AI. So we'll start with the PSD. Again, just drag that across onto the project window. You want to make sure that rather than importing as footage, because that will want you to either merge or select a layer, you want to import as composition retain layer sizes. And then if we double click on that, we've got each of our layers, but you'll notice that the boundaries of each layer is dictated by the alpha of that layer, which is handy if you want to scale or rotate those letters. The thing you need to bear in mind with Photoshop artwork is when you scale it up too much, you're going to notice a loss in quality. And that's fine if you don't need to scale it up. But if we delete that and then bring in our Illustrator artwork, I'm going to drag it directly onto the graphics folder. And here we've got a similar pop-up window. It gives us the choice of footage or composition. Again, we want composition. And again, this drop down here, document size, all the boundaries of every layer will be the document size, 1920 1080. So you want layer size. Click OK, and then if we double click on that comp, we have exactly the same, but if we scale up one of these letters, again you can see the loss of quality, but then if you check this column here, continuous rasterization, that is going to maintain the vector outline, and that's what I'm going to have selected for this. I'm just going to drop that back to 100. So this is what we're going to use. What I tend to do is leave the original artwork, a version of it intact in one comp. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate that comp and then pull that into Precomps, double click on it. And then I'm going to call this Candy Letters Slide in from left. Keeping it nice and succinct. Now again, this is a pre-comp. Doesn't necessarily need to be. We can copy these letters into our master comp. So I'm just going to turn off the background layer. So we're animating again the master transform properties, and we want the position. I'm just going to use the shortcut. Select them all. P for position. Again, click on the stopwatch icon. I'm on frame 19. Drag it back here, and I'm going to drag these over here. Then we want to ease. So I'm using the shortcut for that, F9. And remember, if all these shortcuts are a bit much, you can just right click here and Keyframe Assistant, easy ease. So again, that movement's, sorry, I should preview, shouldn't we? So N for the end of the work area, or drag across. You can tell I don't drag these across very often. And then numpad 0 to preview. Okay. And now, because the position works slightly differently to scale or rotation, say, it won't allow us to use the value graph and amend these Bezier handles. We won't take a deep dive into that. All we'll do is use the speed graph, and it looks different, but same principle. Dragging out these end Bezier handles is going to slow down the movement here, and we can see that as we scrub through. And then here, I'm not interested in any kind of acceleration particularly from this side, just want to see them slide in slowly. And then if I preview that, okay, might have gone a little bit too crazy here, so I'm going to zoom in. Okay, and I might speed it up a little bit. Across a couple. Okay, so now if I stagger them in time, and I'm going to do it the slightly laborious way, because they're coming in from the left, I don't want them crossing over each other, so I want the Y to come in first. So what I'll do is I'm on 3 frames here, drag the C across, then select the A, then select the N, and then finally the D. Okay. So I think maybe 2 frames difference, and that's what I mean by always be previewing. Sometimes a single frame can make a difference. And I'm just going to pull these in a couple, and again, okay, I think that'll do. So now we can bring that into our comp here. So as these come off, now I don't want the text to be there still, obviously. So I'm gonna, I could shift Control D, but I'll just drag this in. So we don't actually have a background now. We've got a background color, but if we toggle the transparency grid here in the comp window, we can see that there's no alpha to it. It's always good practice to have a solid layer in the background. Now we've got one in our artwork that we can copy. But if you happen to know the hex value of the background that you want, what we can do is right click and go new solid. And this is just going to give us a solid color layer. And we can paste our hex value here. And I'm going to OK that. And that's going to give us a folder. So After Effects creates a dedicated folder called solids, and in here you'll find solids, adjustment layers, which we won't be dealing with in this lesson, and also null layers, which we will. But now what we can do is just drag this to the bottom of our comp and press enter. We'll call it BG for background, and this mysterious icon, which I didn't explain, let's click on that to lock it. So now we can bring in our candy letters. So I'm going to drag them here, have them underneath, and they're coming in a little bit too quick. So let's just drag this across. So yeah, something like that. But obviously preview. Now, just a note on previewing, with something as simple as this, where we're not adding loads of effects, it's not taking long to preview. I can't talk while there's music, can I? It's not taking long to preview, and also if you go up here, I'm just going to turn off the audio just for a second, preview, you'll see here it's saying frames per second, in brackets real time. If your computer's struggling for whatever reason because you've got lots of effects or lots of footage, or your computer's just as old as mine, you might see this text go red and it's not playing in real time. One thing you might want to do is just drop this drop down here, and you can drop the quality down, quality resolution anyway, down to say, half or third, and it's not going to be too noticeable on YouTube here, but you don't need to see it at full quality when you're previewing for an animation, because you're just doing it for timing. But you definitely, at some point, you want to look at your artwork at full quality just to see exactly what it's going to look like when it's exported out. So we've still got quite a bit of our audio left. Okay, so now as I look at the beginning, I'm thinking we may as well use our lockup text instead, but let's alpha map this footage on. This is why it's handy to keep the original artwork as a comp, because then it's just easy to duplicate it. And then this one, I'm going to call Candy Let's scale up. And this should be quite quick because we know what we're doing now. So, shortcut for scale, anyone? Correct, yes. Set them to be 100 and then go back here and then just click 0. Select all, F9 to ease, and then Graph Editor. And let's preview that. Maybe a tiny bit quicker. Perfect. And then we'll stagger them again, but this time in the order that we're going to read them. Let's go 2 frames apart. Can always adjust it. No, I think that's okay. Right. So that's animated. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this text off. Not delete it, because I might change my mind, but bring these scale up letters in to the beginning. Okay. But instead of them overlaying the footage, now that we've got our background layer, I'm going to have the footage matted. So what I mean by that is the footage is only going to be revealed where these letters are. Okay, so we do that by this column here, which is our track mats. We have a track mat pick whip. I'm going to pull that over and select the layer that I want to use as an alpha mat. So now we can see that the footage is only appearing where those letters are. Okay, now you might be wondering why the hell we'd do that, because we can't really see the footage now. But there is a beat that I can see before she reveals the lollipop. So we've got the letters come on, but then we can scale up this pre-comp and it's going to reveal the whole footage. So it's like a little tease of our letters before we get to the end. And I know you know the shortcut now, but S for scale. And if you don't want to start learning shortcuts yet, that's fine. You just need to uncollapse and find your transform controls. Go to scale, and then we can sort of scale it up so that just before she moves that lollipop. And then, boom. Now, you'll notice we've got very blurry edges to this text. And if the movement's quite quick, you might think it's fine, you can get away with it. But it's not great practice. But remember, we've got the continuous rasterization that we can do on those individual letters. So to go into this comp, instead of clicking up here, you can always double click on the pre-comp here. Now, we've got one. Oh, because I demonstrated it earlier on. I did wonder, right. So we've got one. We need to just select all the others. But then, in our master comp, we also need to have it enabled on that comp. So we click that. And you'll also notice that you immediately can see the boundaries of those letters as well. We won't take a deep dive into it, but it does mean that we're maintaining the vector outlines of that shape, which we want. And now let's just carry on scaling it up till it disappears. And again, we just need to ease. I won't use the shortcut this time, just want this to sink in for those of you that are new to After Effects. So right click, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, and that looks like I might have, did I nail that first time? Could I? I'm going to turn the audio off for now. Just put it here. So N for the end of your work area, N. Let's just preview that. It's not, I think I might need to sit with audio, but two of my favorite shortcuts are U to reveal keyframes, and then UU to reveal any properties that you've sort of manipulated anywhere along the line. So here, when we were looking at the anchor point of our text, it's revealing that. So those are two good shortcuts if you want to not be constantly collapsing and uncollapsing things that you've already looked at. Okay, but again, feel free to ignore any of these shortcuts, and you can just do this. Remember, all the important stuff you access by just uncollapsing this area here and then going into the relevant folders. So I think maybe just quickly listen with the audio. Yeah, maybe just move them two across and then one. Okay, that'll do. Well, no, not that'll do, but I'm happy with that. So one more thing, and this is optional if you're just starting out, you don't necessarily need to do this, but we've got our candy letter scale up here. Now after this point, we don't have any footage. This layer isn't necessary. It's good practice to visually be able to see on your timeline when layers are on and off, when they're not needed anymore. So I'm not going to leave this layer on the timeline. After this point, I'm going to trim it. Shift-Control-D, delete that. And then you can see, and anyone else can see, jumping on your project visually, that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the lollipop lady and the candy letters. And then afterwards, we're dealing with the images. I can't help myself, but I'm even going to, and this is optional, I'm going to change the label group colors. Doesn't affect anything to do with the animation, doesn't affect anything that's output in here, but it's just another way to easily see visually the different parts of your animation. So I'm going to give these a nice pinky color, and then here, just because this footage is kind of sandstone background, maybe we'll make them all sandstone label group color. Then I'm not really messing with these, so I'm going to give these no color and lock the background again. And then we've got our end lock up, and 2 purple letters, so we'll make that purple. Okay. Right, so the next thing is we've got, if I preview the whole thing up to here, and I really am sorry because you must be hating this music by now. So that music gets pretty epic here where I put a layer marker. So let's bring in a random clip to shake things up. And we have this also from Pexels. And let's drag this down. The ratio of the footage isn't ideal for what we want, but we can scale it. And we have a skeleton surrounded by sweets with its skeleton shaking. Maybe a bit on the nose thematically. Sweets aren't good for you kids, but kind of something fun to just switch to when that music goes all out. I'm just dragging it along the timeline here. We don't really want him shaking the hand there, so we'll have it start there. And I'll pull in the beginning of the clip here and then just check. Yep. Don't really want to see the rest of the comp there. So we can add an effect to this to just repeat the image either side. Again, this doesn't work for every effect, but if you want to do something and you can vocalize it, say repeat, just try doing repeat, and then, I mean obviously I know this works because I know the effect, but we have a stylize effect, CC RepeTile, that we can drag on. And that doesn't do anything until we expand those values, but we can expand this out right. That's just going to duplicate the image. And then I'm just going to type in 963. It's subtle, but I can just see the edges there, so I'm just going to scale it up a fraction more. Okay. Right, so that can come in here, and let's just preview that a tiny bit. Okay, I mean that's bonkers, but why not? But this is going to lose its charm very quickly, so I think we'll have it come off here. So Shift Control D, and we'll go back to this. But I think we need some kind of strapline or payoff there. But again, even within this, let's just preview this now. So, and I'm going to scrub through with audio, which is Control. Here, there's like a pitch change around here. Maybe there, we can punch in to this. So what I'm going to do is, I won't keep using shortcuts all the time, but we can drop down and go to transform. And I think we'll need position and scale. So highlight those. I'm going to drag these over, shift, move them so they snap to the beginning, and then I've lost my edit point. I'm an idiot. So let's just scrub through again. It's about halfway. Okay. So here, I don't want to scale up, so we're going to use a different type of keyframe here. So what I want to do is I'm going to hold these values. I want to hold the position value, I want to hold the scale value. So what you can do is, with both keyframes selected, right click and go, for some reason, I'm not sure why, it's not in Keyframe Assistant, but it's here. You've got toggle hold keyframe. If you click on that, it changes the shape of those keyframes, and subsequent keyframes will be, I think, square. We'll see in a second. But what that does is, instead of calculating the values between the keyframes and say giving you a smooth animation, it will literally jump from one value to another value. So it's easier if I just show you, but we'll scale this up. So we'll kind of punch in to the head of the skeleton. So I'm going to move this down. And again, if you don't want it wobbling all over, just shift, drag down. And then we can sort of, I mean, fair play. I like what they've done here. They've got a Indiana Jones kind of snake coming out of the eyeball and a lollipop in its mouth. It's quite fun. So anyway, we now have, look, 2 square keyframes, but then as we scrub across, we can see that these values aren't changing. Okay, so it's just punching in. You can change these keyframes back if you wanted to by selecting them and then control clicking them, and that'll change them back to those linear keyframes. But I'm going to control set that. We don't want that. Okay, so again, let's preview this whole thing. N for the end of the work area, and then B for the beginning of the work area, and preview again. Don't know what happened there, let's do it again. Okay, so I think we're nearly done. Let's just have a little payoff line at the end, and it has kind of riled me this whole time that I've been calling this candy, because we don't call them candy over here.
What's it say? I don't know.
We call them sweets. So let's create a new text layer. And type over here we all about sweets. Just scale that down. So I'm going to use the shortcut that you can see up here to zoom in, and it always bothers me, the justification when you've got a character like this. Okay, so do you justify it? Oh, by the way, so if you want to scale up in smaller increments than whole numbers, you can just press Control and use the up and down arrow keys, and then you can see it's going in points. So yeah, I never know, should we be doing that? But that just doesn't. I know, but so anyway, I'm just going to justify it to the edge here. Okay, and as I've said several times, I am not a designer. Then let's zoom out, and then we just want that to appear, and I'm gonna label this purple, and that is going to appear to the end here. Okay, and I think that might be it. Let's preview. Just a few things that I haven't covered before we call it a day. So when you've got effects on assets, you can turn them off by just clicking on this effects icon here. Motion blur we haven't looked at if we just scrub through. So with this scaling up, if we wanted motion blur, you have to enable it here, but then also you need to go in and you have to enable it on individual layers as well. So then we can see that's motion blurring. We don't want motion blur, not for this. And what else? Oh, if you're not seeing any of these columns for whatever reason, it may be because you've got them turned off here. So you can turn all these columns off, and on by clicking on these icons here, which is handy if you want to free up space in your timeline, and if you're not needing alpha mats or layer modes, you can turn them off and then you can turn them on again. But then when you turn this one back on, the time stretch, then you've got these columns here, which you can turn off by right clicking and hide this, or you can select columns and then just turn the ones off that you don't want that way. The stretch one I actually find quite handy. It's probably the easiest way to time stretch footage. You've got time remapping, which, hey, I've done a tutorial on that, but you know, if you wanted to speed this clip up, then it's actually the reverse of Premiere, which can be counterintuitive, but if we wanted to speed this up, we would go 50, and it's going to disappear because we sped it up. This is done into a bit of a quick fire round, but this icon here, you can turn on title safe. I use this quite a lot to make sure things are centered or evenly spaced out. Turn that off. There's a shortcut for that above. And yeah, one thing I forgot. So it's always nice to have a constant sense of movement. And the only thing that's kind of not moving is this half a second here. I can show you null layers and parenting. So we're just going to right click and go new null object. So if I solo this, and that was just an excuse to use that hand solo image, this doesn't have any alpha, so it is literally just an object that we can use to essentially, in a crude way, group layers. So here, because we want all of these, and I'm going to solo these as well, so what I want to do is have them all just scaling up as one together, and that's this parent and link column here. So we just take the pit whip, similar to how we did the track mat earlier on. You just drag it over, drop it onto the null, okay, and you'll see that they're parented because you can see these drop downs, parented to null 1. Let's label this. So we'll just call this 5 times images. Give it the same label color because, you know, anal. And I'm going to make the in-out points, you know, the same. You don't need to be this prescriptive, but so Shift-Control-D, delete that. Okay, so they're parented to this. So now I just want like a subtle zoom. S for scale. And it's really only going to be a couple of, I'll go to the end. Like 2, I think sort of 2. And then you can see they're just scaling up subtly. So there's just constant, well, I say constant movement apart from this, there and there, but still. I think now we are ready to render. And the simplest way, if you're used to Premiere, is Control M to send it to the render queue, but equally, your render queue window should be here, but you can always access it by going to Window and then Render Queue here. And you can just drag and drop your comp. Again, we won't take a deep dive into render settings. For this, we're going to render H.264, 40 megabits per second. And then it's worth clicking on the render settings, just checking your time span is the work area. Just be aware of that when you're previewing things. Make sure that it is rendering from the beginning to the end where you want it to. So that's fine. Gonna OK that, and then output 2 is just the folder that you want to render it to. And in this case, we'll optimistically render to final. And then save. Oh, one thing I noticed, it's good that I watched that as it was rendering. So I actually saved it before I rendered. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Revert. So I don't have to set that up again. But one thing I noticed in render settings, motion blur is on for checked layers. And you can manually set it off here. But actually what I'm going to do is just go into that pre-comp, because I noticed here when it rendered we had motion blur, and just go in and just uncheck that. We don't want it. And then save again, render, overwrite. There we go. Just a deliberate mistake I threw in there for you. Okay, and that's it. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.